Tell us a little bit about your background in the customer communication space and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. It was a hot summer day in 1997 when I joined a service provider.
Oh boy.
I had an interview for a job at a service provider that's been since acquired and moved, but I still have a lot of friends over there I keep in touch with. And I for learned to program as a document designer. First thing I learned was working with Elixir, CompuSet,
Okay.
and Press were my first tools. Then I joined the software side, went with one of my colleagues and joined Princesoft. Worked there for 9 years, customer communications, worked at Extreme for 6 years, and then Quadient for 10. And I've been here at Smart Communications almost two.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Smart really seems like they're shaking and jiving and doing some cool stuff, and we're gonna jump into that a little bit. But could you just kind of tell me about where are we today? What is the state of the CCM market? And I know you talk to a lot of analysts and you do your analyst roundup, which is really neat to read. Uh,
We're in a place where everybody wants to do something, but people are a little bit hesitant.
yeah.
So we're starting to see people who are saying, okay, we're going to put a lot of new questions in these RFIs or RFPs.
Hmm.
They're interested in where vendors are going. They're making decisions based on where vendors are going, but they're maybe not using the technology just yet. So especially in the enterprise segment that we specialize in. So we just had an RFI that we're working on for in the healthcare industry, and it was a company we would not have thought had 10 questions about AI in their RFP.
I was going to say AI is probably I would guess is the key driver of that, right? Just it goes in so many different directions.
Absolutely. And this one, the questions range. You can tell a lot about a company by the questions they put in their RFIs and RFPs, and we get these all the time. People on my team, like Chris on my team, he spends a lot of time answering questions. John and I worked on a few of these for this healthcare provider, and these questions focused on indemnification, infringement, and they were risk questions. So it was really
Hmm.
interesting because sometimes they're capability questions, but all of these questions were about risk. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
do I have uncapped liability for in case the prompt returns the script to Shrek 2? Nobody would want to include
Exactly.
that in
Learn
anything
from
that,
learn some bad habits in the training, right? Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about that before. That's really the risk in critical communications where you're introducing artificial intelligence. That if it picks up some bad habit somewhere, and a customer comes along and says, "Please tell me how this device came up with this answer," and you can't answer that question, that's a problem. And I think it's in some ways is what's maybe holding the CCM industry or the sort of that core kernel of customer communications technology sort of back a little bit because customers I think are hesitant to bring these things into a production environment where it could make a bad decision, right?
we have a really good answer though, and that's where deliberate moves and understanding like the technology stack implications are pretty important.
Yeah.
We use the Amazon Bedrock technology from AWS for our AI primarily, actually exclusively. Um, and that comes with uncapped liability for indemnification for prompt results for IP infringement. So some of the other ones out there, I mean, got AI features, but maybe don't have the coverage or the risk or the uncapped liability. So it's something that people have to look at. So somebody wants a CCM solution, they want to look at some capabilities, but then they got to figure out how to answer those questions. And some of it's not so easy. Like if you have to bring your own AI, it's difficult, or if you have to go deep into your agreement to find out what the cap levels are, that's just an extra job you have to do in procurement. And that starts to make people sweaty and say, you know what, maybe if I don't have a good answer easy, maybe this isn't for me right now. And that's one of the things
Mhm.
that CCM vendors are trying to say. It's like, no, 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 you can do this stuff right now or not.
Right.
But you're going to have to make a decision as if you are going to use this.
SmartComms is a global company. You've got customers all over the world, right? I guess I'd like your thoughts on how you see what you just described from an AI perspective. How does that differ in, say, Western Europe compared to the United States or maybe elsewhere where regulations are different?
We're talking about that on a daily basis here, Andy. I was just on a call earlier today with our CMO Julie Knight, and she was looking at a few different new options for messaging. And one of the things we went straight to is like, well, there's a regulation framework, the EU AI framework, that's gaining some steam and actually starting to get some teeth. It's one of my favorite podcasts. Is there's a EU AI framework podcast that I listen to. It's a little bit scary because it hasn't quite crossed the uncanny valley. It's AI written and AI voiced.
Oh
Comes out
boy.
every couple of weeks. So, um, their production values are pretty low. Um, so that's about regulatory context. And CCM has to pay attention in Europe to what they call high risk and limited risk applications.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
high risk applications, like the AI is making a decision. Okay, that's not CCM. CCM doesn't make decisions, and even our data collection stuff from Smart IQ doesn't make the decision. But the communications that even service providers throughout Europe or direct enterprises, they're making communications that are relevant to or following from those decisions. So they may have to start including like disclosures, like this decision was partially done, is a high risk decision from an AI perspective, and they may have to have a corresponding disclosure on that.
Yeah. Use at
Um,
your own risk, right?
yeah, or just
Yeah.
say, you know what, the AI made the decision for your denial of insurance.
Here's
You
your
know, we're
options. Yeah. You
yeah,
pick one, two, or three, but yeah,
yeah. But
interesting.
and then for limited risk, like it might be during the CCM composition moment, it may be picking something or picking AI determined content. So you might need to log that. So content provenance is something that's about to be very important, especially in Europe from a regulatory standpoint. Over in
Yeah.
the US, not from a regulatory standpoint, but from an inventory standpoint. Somebody might want to say, what comprises my CCM portfolio or my customer communications? And I maybe want to survey what is or is not AI generated, especially for language translations and denials. That
Smart Comms is a global company. You've got customers all over the world, right? I guess I'd like your thoughts on how you see what you just described from an AI perspective. How does that differ in, say, Western Europe compared to the United States, or maybe elsewhere where regulations are different?
um, we're talking about that on a daily basis here, Andy. I was just on a call earlier today with our CMO Julie Knight, and she was looking at a few different new options for messaging. And one of the things we went straight to is like, well, there's a regulation framework, the EU AI framework, that's gaining some steam and actually starting to get some teeth. It's one of my favorite podcasts. Is there's a EU AI framework podcast that I listen to. It's a little bit scary because it hasn't quite crossed the uncanny valley. It's AI written and AI voiced.
Oh
Comes out
boy.
every couple of weeks. So, their production values are pretty low. Um, so that's about regulatory context. And CCM has to pay attention in Europe to what they call high risk and limited risk applications.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
high risk applications, like the AI is making a decision. Okay, that's not CCM. CCM doesn't make decisions, and even our data collection stuff from Smart IQ doesn't make the decision. But the communications that even service providers throughout Europe or direct enterprises, they're making communications that are relevant to or following from those decisions. So they may have to start including like disclosures, like this decision was partially done, is a high
AI
risk
means a lot of different
decision
things to different
Right.
stakeholders, though.
Context is important, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And but in the US, like EU has like the EU AI framework. So that's specifically EU. The UK is doing some things, but over in the US, we're kind of wait and see because there were some AI regulation prohibition
Hmm.
concepts that might be in the big beautiful bill. We're doing this in June, July
Right.
2025, to be clear, for
Right.
anybody else, where there's a piece of legislation that's being debated. Don't know what's going to be included or not included, but there potentially could be a very strong counterbalance to the EU, where there might be a prohibition against new regulations for a period of time, which will
Mhm.
shape AI globally. So EU and US implementations could be radically different in just the next few months.
Earlier about, obviously you got to train these things, right? You have an AI tool, and you're an insurance company, and you have a 25 years worth of stuff in your archive, right? And I know SmartCom's just acquired, partnered with
Yeah,
an archive solution.
yeah, on April 24th, we announced our acquisition of Yoisto, and on June 17th, we relaunched it, branded as Smart Hub.
Okay. And, you know, so companies are using those they're looking at that asset, right? They're saying, hey, we've got 10 billion, documents sitting in that archive, whatever that number is. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of information there that we can extract. Are companies using that to train their LLMs and their AI engines, and how is, where SmartCom sit on that? I mean, is there you see an opportunity to make improvements or bring some new solutions to market in that space?
Yeah, there's definitely a reason why we picked that archive technology at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Um, just as you mentioned, archive documents are the best place to train some of your LLMs, but also to pull up relevant documents when you're having customer service moments, whether that's a call center or an insurance agent that says, you know what, I want to go, before I have this call later with Andy, I want to go check, I want to check all the old correspondence.
Hmm.
So let me go check that stuff. And
Yeah.
something that changes in the AI era is archive used to be all about the storage and a little bit about the retrieval.
Right.
So our archive industries really kind of took off with the Sarbanes-Oxley 7-year retention
Right.
mandate. So the challenge was to comply with regulations. So that was the job to be done, was comply with Sarbanes-Oxley requirements. The constraint that they had to develop around was storage costs in the mid 2000s,
Right.
which that was kind of the bottleneck. So a lot of the contracts were priced around those storage limitations, and that persists to today. So pulling from an archive is very expensive, and that's precisely what the AI systems, whether it's a call center as a service or your customer
Mhm.
engagement platform, pulling documents, that got real expensive, and
Mhm.
AI is scaling that up. So what we have is we picked archive technology that is very retrieval biased. So retrievals are computationally cheap within
Mhm.
the Smart Hub technology. So we can enable rapid migration and pulling massive amounts of documents for summarization, whereas an old legacy contract, it's going to give you some surprise invoices. We've heard of surprise, six-figure invoices for, oops, we just pulled everything out of cold storage on an AI test.
SmartPath, you've mentioned that a couple of times, and just tell me a little bit more about that, because that's an orchestration engine.
It's digital
Do I
delivery and
understand it?
orchestration. Yeah, it's interesting because it's very well aligned with some of the other things you love to cover on at Treeline.
Yeah.
So Treeline, print suppression. I know you become, like, what did you say, the most hated man in print for a while.
Oh, yeah. I was told not to say that anymore, but I think it's
Oh,
true. But
yeah, yeah. But we're looking at ways to help manage not only the costs are important, but it's not only the costs, it's effectiveness. And one of the things that really stuck with me with your research was the younger generation, they don't think print is on or off. They think print is sometimes, like, if I can print it and put it on my refrigerator, print equivalent, do it at my house,
Mhm.
counts as print for some of these demographics. So I like that you uncovered some of those secondary and tertiary questions.
Right.
And we take that to heart. And when we talk about Smart Path, we're doing a lot of failover.
Hmm.
Individual try the primary channel, go to a secondary channel, and then what we can do with Smart Path is a little bit different, because there's a lot of orchestration out there in the CCM world. Try and send one channel, failover to another is pretty stock standard. But at the end, we can do things like, you know what, you told me email.
Hmm.
You told me email. We gave you $3 off, and your email bounced, and we sent it to you print.
Yeah.
We
And now
can
you
then at
cost us
the
money.
end, yeah,
Yeah.
well, at the end, we can then use our Smart IQ data collection technology and say, you know what, we're going to send you a preference survey again. So you can now answer some of your questions to adjust your preferences based on the email doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Did you change your
Yep.
phone number? So we can do more of the job. The job to be done is I want the message to get delivered to Andy.
Hmm.
And if it doesn't get delivered, you know what? My next job or my next communication, I can put either a QR code to link you to that survey, or I can email you if I have the right email, or send an SMS link. It says, hey, let's take a look at those preferences again because they weren't deliverable. They didn't work last time.
Archives, I traditionally think of your customers being mainly end users, enterprises, but you do have some print service provider clients as well. Where are you seeing opportunities for print service providers, or I shouldn't say communication service providers is maybe how I
Mhm.
should better phrase it, where they're performing these operations, even things like your archive and the retrieval as a service. Um, any thoughts around that?
Yeah. The archive service that we purchased from Yoisto, that's now Smart Hub, does do a lot of archive as a service for clients that are selling archiving as a service as
Mhm.
part of their larger offering. So it's very well scaled there. But for service providers, we have a couple, especially we have a strong partnership in financial services that creates um, financial communications with with SmartCom. For the service providers, we're really looking at those high value documents to make sure those are delivered. So,
Mhm.
and doing omni-channel and also multi-steps. So
Mhm.
we are going to send you this in the mail. It is important that you sign this. Please expect this in your mailbox. Hey, did you get this? Especially if
Mhm.
somebody has a follow-on action.
Mhm.
That's one of the things that Smart Hub does really well is it tells you what kind of nothing happened.
Yeah, I
So
like
if
that.
I send an email and it bounces, it says, hey, an email bounced. If I was expecting you to click on something or do a response, it could say, hey, it's been 3 days. Let's send that reminder communication. So it has built in omni-channel, multi-channel failovers. So you can send an email. I know Andy got it. It didn't bounce. I know it was read and nothing happened. Let me try sending another email or an SMS to see if he really wants to, you know, upgrade this car insurance or, do this thing, sign up for the electricity monitoring air conditioner shut off thing. Yeah, data collection is a massive part of our business because it helps get new customers. It's the moment just before the sale. And that's an
Mhm.
important moment. And that's a different budget. So like there's a one kind of budget holder
Mm.
that's on data collection, and then maybe a different budget for maybe sends to a service provider or makes the communications in-house.
And a
And
different
that's
business case, I would think too, right? I mean, because you're talking about data accuracy and all the things that go with problems that occur downstream if you've got bad data
yeah.
versus just delivering a communication.
One of the things we have that I was super excited when I joined Smart Communications. It was the thing I like kind of knocked on everybody's door, like virtual door, and said like, "Hey, tell me more about conversation history,"
Right.
because that was something that I had seen in the marketplace. I was very intrigued about. Nobody was ever going to tell me how it worked because I wasn't at Smart Communications at the time. Um, but now that I know how it works, it's something that's very valuable to service providers as well as enterprises direct, and it tracks what decisions were made to
Mhm.
create your specific communication, and that can
Okay.
be put into the archive as well. It's like if you're a platinum customer and I'm a mere bronze customer, it can store that piece of context later so that in June of 2025 your communication was received because you were a platinum customer and mine was received because I had a different text because I was a bronze customer. And let's say 5 years goes on and now you're a platinum customer because that's the top level, but maybe now I'm a gold or a platinum customer. When they
Mhm.
go back into the archive and pull it up, they can say, oh, well, you got to treat this person like a platinum customer now, but when they received this offer wasn't available because they were only a bronze customer.
Yeah,
So you
that
can start
context
to
is
pull,
really important. Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
why and when items or fragments were included starts to be very important. So conversation history memorializes that at the same time it composes the page.
Wow. That's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's
Well,
pretty
that's why I
awesome.
love
Like
talking to you, Scott, because I learn stuff, you know?
it's like I keep asking questions about it. Like it's one of my favorite things to talk about within the smart communications. Our tech team, like Richard Ward, always sees me. He's like, "You're going to ask about conversation history, aren't you?" Like, yes, I am.
No, I can see how that's really, really powerful. And again, it's all about customer experience, right? I mean, you're one of the guys that I remember back in the day. That wasn't seems like a long time ago, but really wasn't. That customer experience was sort of the driving factor, and I believe still is the driving factor for a lot of your clients. They're looking to continue to elevate that, to retain customers and all the things that brings. So what's next? You've seen a lot of stuff. You're at a very innovative company now. When you look into your crystal ball and you shine it up and you stare into it, what do you see?
I see from a customer communications perspective, the job is getting wider.
Hmm.
So the handoff to, hey, start my job starts a little bit earlier, and it's going to keep getting earlier, and the end is going to keep getting later. So the job that used to be done, let's take it 5 or 10 years ago, the job was create this communication.
Hmm.
Then maybe a few years after that, it started to be, can you create this communication and then deliver it for me if it's digital?
Yep. Yep.
But if it didn't work, you had to manually do failovers or, and then just keep trying to delivering it or
Yeah.
keep trying to deliver it. And then at the end, if it didn't work, you were just stuck with it. But now
Right.
we can start doing some things where, okay, it didn't work. Let's send that back to train the text, because now everything is an A/B test. We're not just A/B testing something with the AI
Everything. Yeah.
technology. Everything is an A/B. It's an A to infinite.
Right.
It tests like as
Yeah,
many
that's
columns
cool.
as an Excel sheet has. That's
Yeah.
what A/B tests are now, because the scale is infinite. So you can send it back to be retrained, but also you can start to finish that transaction. So if the message didn't work, we can start to send a survey or something else. Say, hey, why didn't this happen? Did we miss the mark? Nobody gets paid to send statements in an enterprise. Like your job is
Right.
to send statements. Great. The job is to get paid.
Yeah.
Sending statements is part of the get paid job. So the job of like, okay, we're going to send these statements, then we can start to track like which ones came back earlier.
Hmm.
Is there a common denominator? What got you paid first? So as we start to do more communications, you can do more analysis when you start to pay attention to delivery and channel failover. Say, okay, people who receive this channel tend to pay faster or slower. People who are on this channel tend to pay, faster or slower. Let's revise our channel strategy, maybe flip it so that we're sending to the most likely to get paid first. So that's the job to be done just keeps getting larger. Instead of make communication, make communication, deliver it, make it, deliver it, ensure they take the business action, make it, deliver it, make sure they take the business action, try and learn something about it if they didn't. So, and then integrate that to more and more systems, like send it to the archive, pull from the
Right.
archive, pull that same document from the archive later when they call the call center. So
Yep.
it's not linear anymore. It's like recursive. It starts
Right.
to come back.
So well, I guess it brings up a couple of things. This is really fascinating. So where is the system of record? Is it sort of shifting, moving? Because now you're talking about sort of traditional CCM stuff, sort of owning the customer, right? That may have been the domain of other technologies in the past, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But do you see that sort of system of record of, hey, we know everything about Scott? It's not just we know where he lives. We have that context of he used to be a gold member and now he's a platinum member and all these other bits and parts. Are you seeing that shift of who owns the customer?
We're starting to store it. So we're starting to store the likely artifacts in the future that can make up that. So there's a whole
Hmm.
bunch of MarTechs out there. I just came back from a summit, a customer experience event, and
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
yeah, a lot of it was call center as a service, saying we're using AI to summarize things. Like, what are they
Okay,
summarizing? They're
the stuff that we're
only
doing.
summarizing CCM stuff.
Exactly.
And the context. That's why I love conversation history paired with archiving.
Right.
because now
Right.
we're recording the information, the context with the record, so that when an AI summarizes it, they know that Scott was a lowly bronze customer when we gave him this offer. We are now willing to upgrade him to 100 minutes or something, whatever.
Question from service providers. We're fully digital or on a very digital. Now what? Where do we go? We become an agency. We become this. We become that. And I think I just see, because what I'm hearing from people, particularly when I go to Europe, is they're not talking about smart comms or other, sort of companies. They're talking about Salesforce. They're talking about Adobe. And, there's this gray line that seems to be fuzzy line that seems to be developing between what we have traditionally known as customer communications and some of these more traditional MarTech stacks, where the biggest distinction that I can make is that we, meaning the customer communications, we know regulations, we know compliance, we know security, we know data manipulation, we know all this stuff, right? But the MarTech people are all about engagement. Like, we want to sell Scott something. What are we going to do to sell him? And you talked about A/B testing. Now every conversation now becomes an A/B test. And so, are you seeing that, or it just seems like this is where we're kind of headed. I don't know.
We're starting to see the questions, like people storing conversation history want to preserve that context.
Right.
You can do analysis later. Like a lot of the AI talk now is all like generative AI, but there's a
Right.
lot of machine learning stuff that's just really good at analytics. So not everything has to be summarized, and not everything has to be turned into a picture with a space cat on it or something. Sometimes it's just a lot of data analysis at scale, and you just chuck a lot of data and it brings you back some interesting conclusions. That's what we're trying to prepare our customers for, so that they have all the tools and all the data and all the context, so that they can always create the best communication strategy for every step of their customer journey. Event, and we had a pretty good session. It was a high energy one, and we had a lot of people come to the booth. And we have a bank that's a very good customer of ours. Bunch of people from the bank came by, said, "Hey, what do you do?" We showed them, we did their data collection forms and their customer communications on
Mhm.
the iPhone and the tablets. We were showing them all the stuff they had, and they were like, "Yeah, we know. We work with you guys. We like that we get this project done in 1 or 2 weeks. It's great." We said, "Oh, what did you do before?" And they're like, "Oh, it got on a backlog, and it could take 6 to 12 months before we got an
Yeah.
answer."
Yeah. From that. Yeah. Yep.
Like
Sounds pretty
we had
normal.
we we had 4 or 5 of these conversations.
Right.
And I know you're very strong at tree line on design, and covering how like design's important. Then we had these 2 people come by, and we said, "Oh yeah, here's what we do," and we showed them the examples from their bank, and they were visibly upset, Andy. And it was almost like, you're those people. And they said,
Oh,
"Oh,"
I've had
and
that. I've
they
had
wouldn't
that
tell me.
feeling all the
Yeah,
time.
they didn't tell me what they didn't like about it. It was a Mean Aloud conference. We didn't spend a terrible amount of time, but I will remember, even though I won't share it today, I will remember these people's name for years. They're like, "Oh no, like we like to do it a different way," and it was an Adobe technology way. We're like,
Yes.
"Well, these people get it done in like 1 to 2 weeks. How long do you take?" They're like, "Well, our backlog is like 6 to 8 months." We're like,
Mm.
"Well, okay, well, these people needed it now, and the alternative to not having it is download this PDF, and at the bottom it says print it out and bring it to the branch." Like, there's hundreds of those. I'm like,
Yeah. Oh,
these
wow.
people could get it done in 1 year.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
people can't
Yeah.
get it done for 5 or 7 years. In fact, you haven't done it since, let's see, what was the
Yeah.
iPhone released in 2007? Okay. So
Yeah.
like that was a
Yeah.
big change inflection point. And now, nearly 20 years later, they still haven't digitized their forms. It says print it out and bring it to a place that still has pens chained to a desk.
Yeah. Well, so maybe I need to add to my thing. It's not just compliance and security and data. It's time to market.
Yeah.
Right. It's the ability to execute on a maybe just a line of business application that says we've got to get this form into the marketplace or whatever that looks like, and not have to go to the IT department and beg and plead and say, please, we need this year or whatever that looks like.
Because
Uh,
some of the pure digital marketing people, they do an amazing job on your website. They're not data collection people, and it starts to get weird when you have those people own it. Our
yeah,
Smart IQ customers at this bank, they get projects done in a week, 2 weeks, and their customers are happy. And we have taken the challenge. We've done a lot more to improve the design with our last release of Smart IQ, but that time to market, like 1 week, is amazing. That's I can do it. It's going to take one
that's
week
money in
of
the bank, right?
effort. Yeah, it takes
Yeah.
1 week of effort to even deal with the people to get on the list.
Yeah,
So
it always amazes me that everybody's like, "Hey, customer experience," but you got to wait, right? And that just doesn't play anymore. So that's where what where can people see smart comms? I mean, you got events coming up. Like, we're going into the summer season now, but what is the say the rest of the year look like from an event perspective where people can come and engage with you and your team and see the product in action?
yeah, we hit a lot of vertical events the second half of the year. October 7th in the UK, we have our Innovate event for our clients who can
Mhm.
come and see all of our great innovations. Um, they'll start to see Smart Hub and probably Smart Path over there at that event. Right now, Smart Path is for North American customers. It's living for early customers in our North American AWS environment. But we have a lot of use cases. We're starting to sign up our speakers for that one.
Mhm.
But we just hit a lot of the vertical conferences. Some of them are analyst specific. Will be a Cutter Connect for financial
Mhm.
services. That was a great one for our Smart IQ data collection. We do a
Mhm.
lot of the Salesforce events,
Mhm.
especially in Europe. Those do really well for us, and people like to engage because we're part of the Salesforce, and we're starting to do a couple AWS ones as well.